Yes, thanks, Chris. Final resource is a book called Empowering Leadership by Michael Fletcher. And he says on there, how a leadership development culture builds better leaders faster. And so that's the essence of the book. I came across Michael Fletcher was the senior pastor of Manor Church in near Fort Bragg in the US for many years, a church that I think under his leadership grew from about 350 to about 9,000. I think when I last engaged with him, I think they had expressions in something like almost 100 other countries around the UK, around the globe. And because they were close to Fort Bragg, which is a US military base, they were constantly having people in their church sent out around the world. And so they had this massive turnover in their church. So growing leaders, they just had to approach differently and quickly. And they were extremely missionally minded. So the interchurch planting, intergrowing leaders, I think they have now got a goal to have a church planted everywhere in the world where there's a US military base, which is fairly impressive.
Yeah.
But so we came across Michael Fletcher as part of a learning community, and he was giving away his book for free. I don't always like things that are free, but sometimes they're really good. But the book, sometimes that book is brilliant because of the time and the season when you get it. And you read the thing that you need in the season that you need it. And that's probably why this book would be on my list, because we were at a learning community that was talking about leadership development and had helped us to identify that we had a leadership development culture within our church. There was a desire for that. The language made room for that. But we didn't have a leadership development structure. We didn't have anything that was like a pipeline or a pathway. And we knew we needed to grow leaders, and we needed to grow leaders fast. And we knew we wanted them to be good. But we didn't really have a pathway. And the thing that's brilliant about Michael's book is it's just kind of, sometimes you want to pick up a book. It's like, will you please just tell me how to do it? And what do I do next from where I am now, where I have nothing in place? And his book really does that. So he kind of talks about the why you need to do that, why you need the pipeline, and helps to explain that. But then in the book also, they have their pipeline and the simplicity of it laid out for you. So it's really like it's 3 steps. It's kind of, I can't remember what they call them, something, and then a next step and lead step. So from when somebody first joins the church, it's like a basic introduction and discipleship, and then a kind of deeper discipleship. But it's always from the very start pointing to leadership. But because he kind of just shares the whole thing with you, you get all the practicalities. It's like all the nuts and bolts are here. Not that I need to copy Manor Church's way of doing things, because there's some things that are different for us, but just the principles were so clear and so strategic that it's like I can see how this would work. This is going to make you build better leaders faster, better leaders for your church. It's like, because we've all got a culture that we're functioning within. So how do you grow leaders for that setting? And I think some of the things that he unpacks in that around, he uses a term actually, decoding your DNA, just really, really helpful idea. It's like we all have a DNA in our churches, a culture, and we may have 3 or 4 statements that state some of that. But then that's like your stated culture. Then there's a whole load of unstated culture that unless we're decoding for people, we're just expecting them to work it out. And the quicker they work it out, probably the better they'll grow and the quicker they'll come on. But we often leave people to do a load of decoding themselves because we haven't stated it. So a lot of their training is around decoding the DNA and then helping put language to it. It's like, well, we want to teach you in that and grow you in that. And so like this book came to us at a point where we did not have a leadership pipeline, but it helped me feel like we could have. And it helped me feel like, actually, if I invest some time in this, we can pull the team together and get some ideas and build a pipeline that is specifically built around CLM and its values, with the things that are going to make leaders what they need to be for this house. But it will accelerate growth because we're putting language to it, we're putting structure to it. People will be able to see what is next. So I would not have been able to put some stuff together without being given the instruction and led forward in the way that I was by Empowering Leadership. And we do have a leadership pipeline now. There's also then been a process for CLM of actually getting that out to people in a way that's helpful to engage with it. And we're still on with that. And we're still refining that. That's not like all just done and dusted. But I think to go from a nothing in place to a something practical in place. And we've just done a load of work on actually getting information for our leadership pathway out into booklets so that everyone who's serving and leading can be able to see what their next step is, how they would grow, and we're then working on the resource base to sit alongside that. But we were really helped with the shaping of that by simply how approachable this book was and how simple it made, or the simple steps. There's no replacement for the hard work of some things where you just have to sweat it out and get it over the line. But if someone tells you what you're doing, then you know, actually, if I do this and I can see the way you're telling me to do it, it is going to land at what we need. And so I'm not guessing. That's why this is on there in my list.
Brilliant. Yeah, I mean, leadership pipelines are something that are very close to my heart. I was able to work with my own church's leadership pipeline and help develop that, and I've done that with some other churches as well. So it's something that's really close to my heart, and I think the value of a leadership pipeline probably can't be understated. And I think most churches, the church that they really long for and see, a leadership pipeline normally is one of the best ways to help churches move towards that. Because in reality, a church that's growing and healthy is something is a place where leaders are empowered, and you can't empower leaders unless you develop them. And so having a pipeline where you're bringing through new leaders, where you're giving away large areas of church life, so that you can focus on what God's called you uniquely to work on. I think that's really important. How does that pipeline? What does that pipeline look like for you? Like getting some sort of on the practical side of it.
I think what we tried to put together was what we initially called an aligned leadership structure. So what we said is actually probably throughout our ministries, there's probably some stages that people can grow through those ministries. And if we can articulate those, what the stages are, what the responsibilities are, what we're asking of people, and then against those responsibilities and stages, we looked at how we were wanting people to grow in terms of their discipleship, in terms of their teamwork and leadership skills, and in terms of their godly character. And then at each level, there's also a competency level. But there's these three other areas that really across everything in church, your teamwork and leadership skills, your discipleship, your godly character, these things should be aligned. So actually, if you're in kids work or if you're on refreshments team, you're going to know that the stage that you're at, the expectations are similar. And in all our ministries, we're trying to grow leaders with similar characteristics. So you can grow as a leader through serving on refreshments. You can grow as a leader through serving on kids. There's nothing that's like a silo of like, oh, you just turn up and serve here. This is just about the chairs. It's never just about the chairs or just about the drinks. So then essentially, what the pipeline is it sits alongside the practical responsibilities and the practical things that are happening within church life, where actually you can step into a role or a serving team and you can start serving straight away. But then there'll also be a conversation about your discipleship and your growth and how you're growing and what your next steps for growth are. And that will depend on what you're in and what would be next. So I think that's the main premise. It's like it's very interwoven. It's through serving, it's through leading. We run some specific, it's interactive discipleship, but we call it serving and leading because it's training that sits alongside to facilitate the pipeline and covers the things we want people to grow in. We could maybe come up with a better name, but serving and leading is what it's called now. And so there's these different ways that you can access some input. A lot of it's actually based within the ministries. So getting our ministry leads and people at all stages to help those coming through after them to be drawn up is still a work we're on with. That's not, I wouldn't say we've completely nailed that. But that's kind of where that sits. And then we have some other things, other ways where you can serve, and particularly we have an internship program if people want to step into another level of development. So that sounds a bit woolly. It's a structure that kind of sits within all the practices and ministries.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think the main thing, I think, is that regardless of whether you're a large church or a small church, you can get started in developing leaders, and a simple framework and thinking about a framework can really help. And so I think probably the best thing is to say is that if you're listening to this as a minister and think, oh, how am I going to develop leaders? It's something like this book, Empowering Leadership, probably would be a really helpful tool just to get started and just to get you moving. Because, I think we sometimes want the perfect tool. And I think that actually just getting started, and you may think, oh, am I doing this right? But actually getting started and getting something that's going to just get you moving is going to be a really good thing. So yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, we started this work probably in 2017. Our church has grown by the grace of God unrecognizably since then, but we wouldn't have been able to keep growing. I mean, it's always a pressure to have enough leaders. But if we hadn't been on with this and hadn't grown some more leaders, we'd be in a bit of a mess now, because we just wouldn't have had people coming through, or wouldn't have had a way to really know, can we put that person into leadership or not, other than your gut feel. And there's a lot to be said for gut feel, but it's not great for people having confidence themselves in what you're putting them in. And that's actually the other side of this, is having a structure and having some things defined really helps when people come, as they often do. It's like, well, why have you put that person into that position but not me? And actually you can have really honest conversations that are about something that's set on paper. It's like, well, where do you see yourself in this? And almost always people aren't always self-aware, but often they are self-aware. And when you show them where that is, they're like, oh yes, I am. I'm here. I'm not there. And so actually I can see why that would be the case.
Yeah.
So it's really helpful, but actually pastorally as well.